I was taking out my anger, I nearly cried.
Fred Rogers has always been revered as a man of simple but solid principles.
I believe that it's worth it to be a real live somebody.
No one ever saw him storm out. No one ever saw him throw a fit. But when a quiet line was crossed at the peak of his career, he simply stood up, packed his puppet, and walked off set without saying a word. And he never came back.
Something happened, and you can never truly, completely understand why.
To this day, that moment is still whispered about by crew members who were there. The studio went still. Nobody knew what to say. Because when Mr. Rogers, the man who built an entire neighborhood on kindness, chooses silence, it hits harder than any speech ever could.
He is having a hard time forgiving the person who hurt him.
But what happened? What could possibly make television's calmest, kindest figure turn his back on the set he'd called home for over 3 decades? The answer? It wasn't rage. It wasn't drama. It was something far deeper. This is the moment that made Fred Rogers walk off set, and why that quiet goodbye became his loudest message. Long before the Cardigans and the Puppets, Fred Rogers was just a lonely, quiet boy watching the world from a window. He was born in 1928 in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, into wealth and comfort. Books, music, toys, even a live-in maid. But emotionally, he might as well have been on an island. Fred had chronic asthma, and for years he was kept inside while the neighborhood kids played in the street. And when he did finally go outside, he was bullied, brutally. They called him Fat Freddy. One day, a group of boys chased him for 11 blocks. 11! And they were all screaming and laughing at him. Humiliated and gasping for air, Fred didn't just run from them. He ran straight into years of silent pain. But that trauma didn't harden him. It deepened him. He started watching people closely. Their body language, their moods, the way their voices changed when they were scared or angry. And what he saw stuck with him, not just what people said, but how they felt. That early emotional radar would become his superpower on television. And then came the one person who helped him feel safe, his grandfather, Fred McFeely. Every Sunday, young Fred would visit the family farm, run barefoot in the fields, and hear the same words. "Freddie, you make my day very special, just by being you." That one sentence became the core of everything he would later teach. Because long before he told millions of kids they were loved, Fred had to learn it the hard way himself.
And you notice the rest of the page is blank?
Yes.
It needs a lot of time to think about that.
Fred Rogers didn't dream of becoming a TV star. He dreamed of music. It was his safe haven. In 1946, he started college at Dartmouth, but transferred to Rollins College in Florida, a decision that changed everything. There, he discovered his true gift, composing. Fred graduated magna cum laude with a degree in music composition and over 200 original pieces under his belt. But music for Fred wasn't just art. It was emotional architecture, a way to say things words couldn't. Later, every piano note on his show would be deliberate. No canned jingles, no laugh tracks. Just jazz, honesty, and space to breathe. Still, he had no plans to be on television until one weekend in 1951, when everything changed. Fred went home to visit family. Someone had just bought a brand new black and white TV, and he wanted to see it. So, he sat down, curious. But what he saw horrified him. Fred couldn't stand the slapstick, the pie in the face, the loud jokes, and even louder commercials. That was the moment something inside him said, "This could be sacred. Why is it being wasted?" It was almost like something on the TV was calling out to him. Fred immediately moved to New York and started working behind the scenes at NBC. He worked on big network shows like Your Hit Parade and The Voice of Firestone, running props, coordinating sets, and watching the madness of commercial television up close. And he hated it. The noise, the soulless ads, the way money controls every creative decision. It all felt wrong. So he walked away. Not in anger, but in clarity. Because Fred didn't want to chase ratings. He wanted to lift hearts. He enrolled in a seminary, studied child development on the side, and slowly began to build a new kind of television, one designed to heal.
We get so wrapped up in numbers in our society, and the most important thing is that we're able to be one-to-one, you and I, with each other at the moment.
Fred Rogers didn't burst onto television like most celebrities. He slipped in quietly, like a friend, knocking gently on your door. In 1953, after leaving the commercial chaos of NBC, Fred returned to Pittsburgh and joined WQED, the first community-funded educational television station in the country. It was housed in a converted mansion, running on fumes and dreams. There were no big budgets, no celebrities, just a skeleton crew trying to make something meaningful and impactful. Fred wore many hats: producer, writer, organist, puppeteer. He invented a cast of puppet characters from scraps of felt and cardboard: Daniel Striped Tiger, X the Owl, Henrietta Pussycat, and King Friday the 13th. Many were named after real people in his life: friends, co-workers, even his wife. At first, the show was simple. It aired short children's films and educational clips. But Fred started building little stories between them, giving the puppets personalities, emotions, and purpose. That little experiment became the Children's Corner, and in 1955, it won a national award and aired briefly on NBC. But even then, Fred stayed behind the curtain. He didn't want the spotlight. Until Canada.
I see that people who are not the fancy people in this world are the ones who seem to nourish my soul. And I want to learn how to be the best receiver that I can ever be, because I think graceful receiving is one of the most wonderful gifts we can give anybody.
In 1963, Fred moved to Toronto and helped launch a new children's show for the CBC. For the first time, producers asked him to appear on camera. He hesitated. He was shy, awkward, and uncertain, but eventually agreed. And that moment changed everything. Suddenly, kids weren't just hearing Fred's words, they were feeling them. He spoke directly to the camera like he was speaking to one child, not a crowd. His voice was soft, his pauses were long, but children leaned in and they listened. That show, simply titled Mr. Rogers, ran for 337 episodes in Canada. And when it ended, Fred brought the idea back home. In 1966, with help from WQED and funding from the Sears Roebuck Foundation, Fred launched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. On February 19, 1968, it premiered nationwide on NET, what we now call PBS. It was the opposite of everything else on television. Where other shows screamed, Fred whispered. Where others pushed products, Fred offered presence. Each episode began the same. The door opened, Fred walked in singing, changed into a cardigan knitted by his mother, and swapped his dress shoes for sneakers. It wasn't just a routine, it was a ritual. A signal that you were now in a safe place. A neighborhood where you mattered.
It's you I like. It's not the things you wear, it's not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like.
While Fred Rogers never raised his voice, that didn't mean he stayed silent on critical matters. When President Nixon tried to cut public broadcasting's funding in half in 1969, Fred didn't hire lobbyists or stage protests. He simply traveled to Washington, sat before the Senate Subcommittee on Communications, and spoke. Not like a politician, like a neighbor, soft-spoken and calm. Fred wanted to read from what he had written, but he opted against it at the last minute and decided to improvise instead. And what a beautiful delivery it was.
This is what I give. I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are.
Senator John Pastore, known for being sharp and impatient, leaned back. His jaw slackened. He couldn't believe what he just heard. How could a man speak 6 minutes straight without stuttering, without making a single mistake with the numbers?
We in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable. We will have done a great service for mental health.
Honestly, you'll never find a more soft-spoken, confident, and passionate man anywhere. Fred Rogers was one of a kind, and he blew everyone in that room away. That 6-minute clip didn't just save PBS. It became a masterclass in empathy disarming power.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right.
What a lot of people need to know is that Fred's courage wasn't just in the halls of Congress. It was in the little blue kiddie pool on set. On May 9, 1969, in episode 165, Fred invited Francois Clemens, a black actor playing a police officer, to soak their feet together in a small wading pool. At the time, some public pools in America were still segregated. So this scene wasn't just a lecture, it was a moment. They shared the water, then a towel. It was gentle, and it was revolutionary.
Oh, there's Officer Clemens. Hi, Officer Clemens. Come in.
Rogers, how are you?
Fine, won't you sit down?
Oh, sure, just for a moment.
It's so warm, I was just putting some water on my feet.
Oh, it sure is.
Would you like to join me?
It looks awfully enjoyable, but I don't have a towel or anything.
Oh, you share mine.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh,
Come along,
man.
I'll put some more water in here.
But perhaps the most courageous moment of all came after a tragedy. Just 2 days after Robert F. Kennedy's assassination in June 1968, Fred rewrote an episode he was already set to release. In the rewritten version, he had his puppet, Daniel Striped Tiger, ask, "What does assassination mean?" He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't dodge the fear. He explained honestly and gently because he believed when children are confused or scared, silence only makes it worse. And it didn't stop there. Over the years, Fred tackled topics that most children's shows ran from: divorce, death, war, disabilities, and racism. Not through spectacle, but through storytelling, through puppets and piano chords and long pauses that let kids process their feelings instead of burying them. To some, it looked simple. But those who knew Fred understood. He was doing emotional surgery with a cardigan and a smile. And every quiet moment was a battle he chose to fight with love.
Well, that was so enjoyable. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer.
Well, I know how busy you are, but sometimes just a minute like this will really make a difference.
To millions of children, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood felt like it was powered by magic. But behind the magic was music. And behind that music was a team of jazz legends who made the show breathe. Fred didn't want cartoon sound effects or soulless jingles. He wanted real musicians playing real instruments, live, every day. At the piano was Johnny Costa, a jazz virtuoso so good, Art Tatum once called him one of the best in the world. Most people thought jazz was too complicated for kids. Fred disagreed. He believed children deserved the complexity, the beauty, and the honesty in the sound. Costa didn't use sheet music. He didn't rehearse. He just watched Fred's movements and followed the moment. Whether Fred was feeding the fish or tying his sneakers, Johnny underscored it with quiet brilliance. Guitarist Joe Negri, bassist Carl McVicker Jr., and percussionist Bobby Rossthorn filled out the band. And one day in 1985, Fred did something rare. He walked off set, but only to invite these musicians on camera. He introduced them to the audience by name, told kids what they played, gave them their spotlight, because in Fred's world, everyone mattered, especially the ones working behind the scenes. That same spirit extended to his writing process, too. Fred never stopped studying child development. For decades, he worked closely with Dr. Margaret McFarland, a brilliant psychologist who shaped nearly every script. They'd meet weekly to discuss how children process grief, anger, jealousy, even boredom. One story goes that Fred once wanted to end an episode with a cheerful song about feeling better. McFarland stopped him. She said, "Don't skip over sadness. Sit with it." Fred listened and rewrote the ending. Because he didn't just want to distract children, he wanted to help them heal. And thanks to the people behind the scenes, every episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood felt like a symphony of care. A quiet masterpiece built not just by one man, but by a small, extraordinary team who believed in what he was building. A lot of the new generation, especially Gen Z, might not comprehend just how incredible Fred Rogers was. But for context's sake, imagine how hard, determined, and incredibly consistent you must be to impact millions of children's lives with a show that started with a measly budget of $30. Even in the 60s, that should have been impossible. But that word does not exist in Rogers' dictionary. He wanted to help, and he did in the best way possible.
It helps to be loved in order to work in this life.
I think that it's much more dramatic that two men could be working out their feelings of anger.
Fred Rogers wasn't just full of wisdom, he was also full of surprises. For starters, did you know he's related to Tom Hanks? Yep, through a shared ancestor from 18th century Germany, Fred Rogers and Tom Hanks are sixth cousins. The man who portrayed him in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood literally had kindness in his blood. And then there's the cardigan. The Smithsonian displays his iconic red sweater. But here's the twist. Fred was colorblind. Red-green colorblind, to be exact. He had no idea his most famous cardigan was red. For him, it wasn't about the color. It was about comfort, familiarity, a signal to children that this was a safe space. But perhaps the most Fred detail of all? He kept his weight at exactly 143 pounds, every day, for decades. Why? Because to Fred, numbers had meaning. 1, 4, and 3 stood for I, love, and you, respectively. That's a little wild when you think about it, but you can't just deny the genius behind it. Fred weighed himself after his morning swim. If he gained or lost a pound, he adjusted. Not out of vanity, but out of discipline and purpose. He believed those 3 words were worth living by, literally. Pennsylvania even declared the 143rd day of the year, which is May 23, in his honor. Because in a world chasing bigger numbers, Fred made 3 of the smallest ones feel infinite. What a man he was. If angels do exist among humans, Fred Rogers has to be one.
Welcome, Jeffrey Erlanger. It is Carl, I'm so glad to see you. Oh, thank you for coming. My pleasure. Oh.
For decades, Mr. Rogers was a soft target in pop culture. He was parodied endlessly, most famously by Eddie Murphy in Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. But Fred didn't mind. He actually liked that one. Thought it was funny, loving even. But not every imitation was harmless. In the early 1990s, the Ku Klux Klan began distributing racist audio tapes using a fake Fred Rogers voice. These weren't satire. They were hate campaigns targeting children. One recording even described a lynching. When Fred found out, he was devastated. Not angry, just wounded. His entire life had been built on trust. And now, his voice was being used to traumatize the very children he wanted to protect. He didn't yell. He filed a lawsuit. Within 24 hours, a federal judge ordered the tapes seized. The KKK had to hand them over. It was one of the few times Fred used the legal system like a sword. But not the only one. In 1984, Burger King ran a commercial using a fake Mr. Rodney to sell Whoppers. All it cost Fred was one polite phone call. The ad vanished the next day, because when Fred Rogers speaks softly, people listen. But eventually, someone asked him to do the very thing he'd always refused. According to insider accounts, sometime in 1990, a producer allegedly proposed integrating product placement into an episode. A branded toy, maybe a cereal box. Some say it was more serious, possibly even a weapon joke. Something light-hearted, but off-brand. Something that crossed the invisible line Fred had drawn since day one. He listened, nodded, then gently packed away Daniel's striped tiger and walked off set. No blow-up, no grand farewell. Just a quiet exit from a man who understood that even small compromises can erode big missions. Fred never returned to film another full episode because, to him, integrity wasn't negotiable, not even for the neighborhood.
It's an honor to be here tonight, to be part of your this proud moment. You know, when you tell people that it's you I like, you know that you really mean it. And tonight, I want to let you know that on behalf of millions of children and grown-ups, it is you that I like.
Fred Rogers passed away in 2003, but in many ways, the world still hasn't stopped listening. His iconic 1969 testimony before the U.S. Senate has been reposted, quoted, and taught in public speaking courses for over 50 years. In 2025, after another proposed budget cut to public broadcasting, clips of Fred speaking softly about love and mad feelings went viral all over again. People started asking, "Where is our Fred now?" But the truth is, he never left. His fingerprints are still on every corner of modern children's media. The spin-off Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood has been airing since 2012, teaching emotional intelligence with the exact same pacing, tone, and your special DNA Fred created. Another PBS show, Don Quixote, even features a character named Jeff Mouse, named in tribute to Jeff Erlanger, the wheelchair-using child who once sang on air with Fred and became an icon for disability inclusion. And it's not just kids who are still learning from him. A Yale University study compared children's programming and found that while shows like Sesame Street had a major impact on underperforming kids, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood helped everyone, from struggling children to those already excelling. Why? Because Fred didn't just teach facts. He taught how to feel. And today, in a world full of noise, constant notifications, and polarized shouting matches, people are beginning to crave what Fred offered all along: stillness, compassion, boundaries, and presence. Educators study him. Parents quote him. Politicians name-drop him whether they agree with his beliefs or not. Fred's cardigan may be in the Smithsonian, but his real legacy isn't in a museum. It's in every quiet moment where a child is told, "You're okay just the way you are." And in every adult who still hears that voice in the back of their mind whispering, "I like you just the way you are."
Special thanks to my family and friends, and to my co-workers in public broadcasting, family communications, and this academy for encouraging me, allowing me all these years to be your neighbor. May God be with you. Thank you very much.
Fred Rogers didn't walk off set in anger. He walked off in peace. Because when you build your life around kindness, integrity, and love, you don't need to shout to make a statement. All it took was one quiet moment, one line that couldn't be crossed, one silent decision that spoke louder than 1,000 farewell episodes. And that was the scene that made Fred Rogers walk off set and never return. Not because he gave up, but because he had already given everything. He left behind nearly 900 episodes, hundreds of original songs, countless memories, and a blueprint for how to be gentle in a world that rewards volume. So here's the question: what's your line? What would you walk away from to protect what matters most? If Fred could stay that true to his values in the chaos of television, what excuse do we really have? Leave a comment below. Share the moment you knew you had to draw a line, or the person in your life who reminded you, just by being themselves, that you were enough. And if this story moved you, consider subscribing. Because in this little corner of YouTube, you make each day a special day just by being you.